Hi, I'm Kat and today I have for you a true crime case, a word in Romanian, and I'll also be doing my makeup at the same time. So the word for today is escroc. 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 Well done guys, you just said con man. Today's story is actually a bit of a different story and one which I'm not sure if there was a crime committed. However, having said that, I'm bringing you this case because I need your opinion and honest view in helping me decide if indeed this fake doctor did really come as a blessing or he was just another conman. Dr. Martin Kauni was a German-born physician who gained recognition for his innovative approach to infant care in the late 19th century and early 20th century. He is best known for his work in incubator technology and for founding the first incubator nurseries for premature and low birth weight infants. He was a doctor who created medical history by saving thousands of premature babies. Very little information is on record for him, but what's left shows that he was worthy of admiration. Now, I don't want you to leave the video now because we are not going to get into any kind of medical terms here. It's just that he was a doctor, but a fake doctor. Dr. Kauni was born in 1869 in the town of Krotozin, which was then part of German Prussia and is now known as Poland. He was born Michael Cohen, a Jewish but not openly, and he changed his name to Martin Kauni when he emigrated to New York at the age of 18. Although different sources say that he emigrated when he was 19 years old in 1888, which is backed by some kind of evidence. His cultural and professional background remain unclear as he repeatedly changed the details about his background throughout his life. He said that he had studied in Leipzig and Berlin and his medical license was European, and so his doctorate was not applicable in America. However, there is no record of Martin ever studying medicine in any European institutions. Because he emigrated when he was 19, he kind of shadows his claims of having completed a medical degree and of having studied under Boudin because of the inconsistencies in this timeline. In 1903, he married Annabel May, a nurse employed in one of his infantoriums. In 1907, Martin's daughter Hildegard was born 6 weeks premature, weighing just 3 pounds or 1.4 kilograms. Sadly, Martin's wife died in 1936. However, they did work together for quite some time. Without any recorded medical credentials, Martin claimed that he was the protege of a renowned French doctor named Pierre Constant Boudin. This French doctor had been made famous as the person who introduced incubators in Europe. However, it's widely accepted that Dr. Kauni was an apprentice under Pierre in Paris, who was an established obstetrician, known as the founder of modern perinatal medicine. In 1896, Martin entered his first exhibition as Pierre's intermediary to exhibit his Kinderbrutanstalt or child hatchery to spectators at Berlin's Great Industrial Exposition. The exhibit was a success and in 1897 Martin was invited by exposition promoter Samuel Schkenkein to host an exhibit at the Diamond Jubilee celebration for Queen Victoria in London to present his first infant incubator show. Following the European success of his displays and a move to the US, Martin held the American debut of his incubator show at the Trans-Mississippi Exposition in Omaha. He then began showcasing his incubator shows in fairgrounds across the US, including the World's Fair in Buffalo, New York in 1901. Regardless of whether he was from a medical background or had any medical credentials, actually Martin dedicated 40 years of his life towards helping premature babies. Dr. Martin Cowney began his medical career as a physician and quickly became interested in neonatology. In the late 1800s, infant mortality rates were alarmingly high, especially among premature and low birth weight infants, who often died from hypothermia and infection. Dr. Cowney saw an opportunity to make a difference and he began experimenting with incubator technology. In 1896, he introduced his first incubator at the Berlin Exposition, which I mentioned previously. The incubator was a heated glass box that kept the premature infant at a stable temperature and protected them from external contamination. This was a major improvement over traditional methods of caring for premature infants, which involved placing them in warm beds or wrapping them in warm blankets. Originally, incubators were used by poultry farmers to hatch chicken eggs, with the original design being a heated enclosed box. Stéphane Tarnier, a prominent French obstetrician in the 19th century, has been widely recognized as the first to implement incubators in the care of human infants. At the time, his ideas were deemed unscientific, until his assistant Pierre Boudin exhibited the incubators at Berlin's World Fair. That's when they gained considerable attention. Martin's alleged apprenticeships under Pierre allowed him the knowledge and also the ability to promote and spread the medical importance of these machines. The importance of human incubators were noted early on in his career by medical journal The Lancet during the Diamond Jubilee in 1897. The Lancet editors visiting the human exhibit said that while the use of incubators had not yet become general in England, they further claimed that any successful attempt to improve the construction of incubators and to render it available to the general public needs to be welcomed. Each incubator at Martin's Infantorium measured around 1.5 meters high with steel walls, framework and a glass front. In order to fill the incubators with warm air, water boilers fed warm water into pipes that ran underneath the incubator where the babies rested, and thermostats were placed inside the incubators to maintain and regulate temperatures. Martin was also concerned with the entrance of impurities into the air of the incubators. To filter out these impurities, the air fed into the pipes was first filtered through wool suspended in antiseptic, then again through dry wool. The air was then cycled out of the incubators, constantly refreshing the baby's air. Dr. Martin Cowney continued to refine his incubator technology and soon became known as an expert in neonatal care. After emigrating to the United States in the early 1900s, he began setting up incubator nurseries in Coney Island, New York and other locations. The nurseries were popular attractions and were visited by thousands of people each year. He started his practice in New York and soon expanded to other cities and countries as well. Dr. Cowney ran his incubator facility for premature babies at Coney Island from 1903 to 1943 and set up similar exhibits at World's Fairs and amusement parks across America and in London, Paris, Mexico and Brazil. His techniques were advanced for the time and his facility was expensive to run, but he didn't charge the parents of the premature babies a single penny. He helped these babies free of charge. Instead, the public paid to see them. He claimed to have a survival rate of 85%. By contrast, most mainstream doctors in the early part of the 20th century regarded premature babies as weaklings and did little or nothing to save them. Dr. Cowney's shows varied in name from fairground to fairground, including the Infantorium and baby incubators. His slogan was, quote, "All the world loves a baby," end of quote. And he encouraged nurses to take the babies out and cuddle them in front of audiences. The babies were placed in incubators with glass doors to allow visitors to see in and contained warm, filtered air. At the Coney Island Infantorium, Dr. Cowney worked in partnership with the established doctor Julius Hess, and he employed a team of nurses who lived on site taking care of the premature infants at all hours. Dr. Cowney is usually remembered for his Coney Island facility, but he also established a similar exhibit in Atlantic City which ran for 38 years, from 1905 to 1943. His facilities were known for their professionalism and also for the cleanliness. Dr. Cowney was influenced by one of his employed nurses and later wife, Annabelle May, who insisted on the importance of strict hygiene and systematic procedure. In 1903, the average cost for the care of one infant at Dr. Cowney's facility was $15, which would be the equivalent of $405 today. The care costs of premature babies was expensive. However, like I said, Dr. Cowney didn't charge the parents of his patients for their care. He made up the costs of caring for the infants through the entrance fees during the exhibitions. The entrance fees covered not only the care of the infants but also allowed him to pay his nurses a good wage and facilitated the frequent travel of the exhibit. Dr. Cowney's incubator nurseries were not only popular, but they also had a remarkable success rate. He was able to save the lives of many premature and low birth weight infants who would have otherwise died. In fact, his survival rates were much higher than those of traditional hospitals, where the survival rates for premature infants were often less than 10%. But despite his success, Dr. Cowney faced numerous challenges in his career. His incubator nurseries were not considered part of the mainstream medical establishment and were often dismissed as sideshow attractions. He also faced opposition from traditional physicians who were skeptical of his methods and believed that his incubators were not appropriate for medical care. But with all these challenges, Dr. Cowney persevered and continued to provide care to premature babies. His work paved the way for the development of modern neonatology and had a lasting impact on infant care. Today, incubators are a standard part of neonatal care in hospitals all over the world, and Dr. Cowney is remembered as a pioneering physician who dedicated his life to saving the lives of premature and low birth weight infants. However, there is evidence that his career was not entirely based in medical fact and that he engaged in deceptive practices. One of the most notable aspects of Dr. Cowney's career was his use of incubator nurseries as sideshow attractions. He would set up his incubators in amusement parks on public display and charge admission fee of $0.25 for people to come and see the premature babies, to witness them battling life and death. Even though these methods were unconventional, this was a critical source of funding for his work, and Dr. Cowney was the only person offering this life-saving treatment. Hospitals at that time didn't have incubators for treating premature babies. On top of that, there was a general lack of resources to help the babies, such as breast milk and nurses. The Americans believed that premature babies were some kind of a social burden, and various medical journals referred to these babies as weaklings. The professional doctors who should have been trying to save these babies instead just gave up on them, considering them a lost cause. But Dr. Martin Cowney was not among those doctors. He lived closely alongside those children even after they were out of their incubators. He used to get invitations to birthday parties and even weddings of the babies that he saved. He would hire barkers to stand at his exhibit's entrance and entice the general public. They used slogans such as "Don't forget to see the babies." These slogans worked really well and people turned up to see the babies. In 1922, Dr. Cowney hired a young British actor as one of his barkers. His name was Archibald Leach, a name that he later changed to Cary Grant. Many people panicked and scared parents used to drop off their premature babies at Dr. Cowney's exhibit in the hopes that he could save them. Hospitals, on the other hand, would offer very little hope to the parents that these babies could actually be saved, but Dr. Cowney did it. When a new baby would arrive at the facility, they would all undergo pretty much the same routine. The babies were first bathed in lukewarm water, and if they were capable, were given a small dose of brandy. Brandy actually helps with breathing and keeping the baby warm as well. Ribbons, either pink or blue, were tied around the babies and allowed visitors to identify the sex of the babies. The babies would be on show throughout the day in individual incubators, excluding 2 hours for feeding. They were fed breast milk in 3 different ways, depending on the abilities of the baby to actually receive milk. Most of them were fed by either wet nurses or by using bottles. However, some of them were administered breast milk spooned through the nose by Madame Recht, one of Dr. Cowney's longtime employees. Dr. Cowney placed strict diet restrictions on his wet nurses. While under his employment, the wet nurses were not allowed to smoke, consume foods such as hamburgers, or drink alcohol, as Dr. Cowney believed doing so would impact the quality of their breast milk. I'm not sure that it was exactly hamburgers, but probably unhealthy food. The infant brought in had been born many weeks premature, and they were well below a healthy birth weight. Stores didn't even make clothing small enough to fit their tiny frames, so the nurses dressed them in dolls' clothes and knitted bonnets. The babies would be cuddled by nurses taken out of incubators for human contact. Dr. Cowney also encouraged his nurses to take the babies out of the incubators and cuddle them in front of audiences. Apart from holding the infants, one of Dr. Cowney's longtime professional nurses at Coney Island, Madame Recht, would show a diamond ring to audiences before sliding it up the baby's arms just to emphasize their tiny size. These performances, however, triggered outcry from child protection groups claiming that Dr. Cowney objectified the babies for monetary gains, which is very interesting because actually Dr. Cowney was the only one who was fighting to save these babies. In 1897, as Dr. Cowney was starting his career in the field of neonatology, an anonymous source in the medical journal The Lancet condemned the exposition as an unscrupulous way to make money. But Dr. Cowney defended his sideshow, claiming his exhibits were the last resort for many premature babies and that his practice's survival rate was much higher, in fact, than many hospitals. In 1934, in order to demonstrate the importance and the success rates of these incubators, Dr. Cowney hosted a reunion at the Chicago World Fair for the babies that he and Dr. Hess cared for in 1933. On July 25, 1934, 41 of the 58 babies, accompanied by their mothers, returned to Coney Island for a homecoming ceremony. The event was broadcasted live on local radio and across the fairgrounds. On the radio program, Dr. Cowney's exhibit was portrayed by the announcer not as a sideshow spectacle, but as an invaluable medical facility. Quote, "The incubator station for premature babies is not primarily a place of exhibiting tiny infants. Instead, it is actually a life-saving station where prematurely born babies are brought from leading hospitals all over the city for the care and attention that are afforded. The place is spick and span with doctors and graduate nurses in constant attendance." End of quote. Because of the sideshow setting in which he operated, Dr. Cowney's career had always been controversial. Many in the medical profession viewed the incubator doctor with suspicion, others even with hostility. The New York Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Children had repeatedly accused him of exploiting the babies and endangering their lives by putting them on show. And again, they are accusing him when other hospitals didn't even treat these babies. It's like when you are trying to save a baby's life, the institutions are kind of blaming you for doing it. I don't know, it just doesn't make sense, does it? None of the complaints was sustained, and by the 1930s, Dr. Cowney was finally being taken seriously as a medical pioneer. His professional collaboration with Dr. Hess marked a key stage in his habilitation. But Dr. Cowney's practices raised questions about the ethics of using medical care as a form of entertainment, like I mentioned previously. But despite criticism from the medical community and questions about the ethics of using medical care as entertainment, Dr. Cowney continued to operate his incubator nurseries for several decades and is credited with saving many premature infants' lives. Dr. Cowney's reputation suffered after the 1911 Coney Island fire. Even though all the babies were rescued, the incident highlighted the dangers of caring for babies in amusement parks. In the medical journal The Lancet, an article titled "The Danger of Making a Public Show of Incubator for Babies" pointed the proximity of infant incubators to animal exhibits and peep shows, concerned that the unsanitary conditions of the animal exhibits would endanger the babies. It was also seen as inappropriate to house the infants so close to scandalous peep shows, especially as the infantorium shows attracted many families and children. The perceived dangers of premature babies' fairground exhibits were accentuated by imposter shows, which began appearing in fairgrounds as a result of the profitability of shows such as Dr. Cowney's Infantorium. These shows often didn't adhere to the same cleanliness and professional standards as the well-known Infantorium. As a result, medical journals at the time condemned the shows as risky and dangerous for premature babies. It's very interesting though that, like I said, all those institutions and people allowing premature babies to die are the same ones condemning Dr. Cowney when he tries to save their lives. The support of Dr. Julian Hess, who became known as the father of American neonatology during the 1933 Chicago World Fair, improved Dr. Cowney's reputation, however. The exhibit ran for 2 summers, over 18 months, from 1933-1934. The facility cost $75,000, which would be the equivalent of $1.4 million today, to construct, and was fronted by a huge sign saying "Living Babies in Incubators." By the end of the second summer, Chicago's health commissioner became involved in Dr. Cowney's efforts. It wasn't long after the end of the fair that Chicago became the first American city to officially implement policies for the explicit purpose of premature infant care. Throughout Dr. Cowney's career, whenever a midway or fairground closed, he tried to donate his incubators to local hospitals, although his donations were never accepted. By the year of his death, in March 1950, incubators had been integrated into public hospitals. Dr. Cowney is now recognized as a pioneer of early infant care. His exhibits worked against the claims of the then popular eugenics movement and helped introduce the issue of premature births to the general population. Due to the high fatality rates of prematurely born infants in the first half of the 20th century, the topic was generally undiscussed. Dr. Cowney's promotion of his infantorium demonstrated that premature infant care could be successful if expensive. The eugenics movement of the early 20th century presented an ideological contrast to Dr. Cowney's treatment of premature babies. The eugenics movement was reaching its peak at the beginning of the 20th century, and Dr. Cowney's infantoriums were often showcased in the same fairgrounds as exhibitions supporting the eugenics movement. Articles in medical journals at the time condemned his treatment of premature babies, stating that the babies would pass on their deficiencies, deformities, and vices to the next generation. A film produced by an American doctor in the early 1900s was even tagged "Kill Defectives, Save the Nation," and articles in medical journals questioned efforts to save premature infants, doubting the efficacy of such efforts. By 1910, there were eugenic contests, yes, all over the country. Yes, contests, competitions, eugenic competitions. Those contests or competitions, called Better Baby contests, among other things, awarded prizes to babies for things like the shape of their eyes or their noses, as if, they were calves or piglets. At the same time, there were arguments in favor of letting less well-favored children, those who were weak or disabled, die. Although the eugenics movement wasn't targeting premature babies directly, they never are they? There was the idea of just letting them go. I mean, it's so stupid, if you think about it, and quite honestly, even though, yeah, it's stupid and, it's not a good thing, it's always happening some way or another where they are trying to push on you some kind of ideology, but, they are not going to be straightforward with you in saying those things, but rather taking the back door. Is that the right way of putting it? I guess you know what I mean anyway. The prominence of the eugenics movement led many doctors at the time to perceive Dr. Cowney as farcical, and premature babies were often left to die without any medical intervention. However, it seems that there is also evidence that Dr. Cowney's incubators were not quite as advanced as he claimed. The heating mechanisms used in his incubators were primitive, and many of the infants in his care suffered from hypothermia and other health problems. Furthermore, there is also apparent evidence that Dr. Cowney's incubator nurseries were not supervised by licensed medical professionals, and the care provided to the infants was not of the highest standard, which raised questions about his qualifications to provide medical care. These medical practices cast doubt on Dr. Cowney's reputation as a pioneering physician in neonatology and raised concerns about the ethics and quality of care provided in his incubator nurseries. Dr. Cowney made false claims about his incubators, such as their advanced heating technology, which were not supported by medical evidence. Dr. Cowney's background and qualifications have also been called into question. There is very little information available about his medical education and training, and it's unclear if he was a licensed physician in the US. Martin gave himself the title of doctor to give himself and his work more authority. He would get away with this title because there was no internet back then, no long-distance phones, and no resources to disprove his fake identity. On top of that, people clearly saw the results of his work in saving premature babies, and they were happy to believe that he was a real doctor. Dr. Martin Cowney's background is somewhat unclear, and there is limited information available about his early life and education. It's known that he was born in Germany in the late 19th century and immigrated to the US in the early 20th century. However, the details of his medical education and training are not well documented. But despite this, he established himself as an expert in the field of neonatology and was known for his innovative approach to infant care and his use of incubator technology. The exact circumstances surrounding Dr. Martin Cowney's interest in neonatology are not well documented. However, when he was born in the late 19th century and by the time he had emigrated to the US in the early 20th centuries, neonatal medicine was a relatively new field, and there was limited understanding of the medical needs of premature infants. Many premature babies didn't survive as there was no effective treatment available to save them. It is possible that Dr. Cowney became interested in neonatology out of a desire to help premature infants and save lives because of his own daughter being born premature. Dr. Cowney always said that he was trying to raise awareness about premature babies to convince the medical establishment that the correct treatment would result in many more babies surviving. But apart from that, he also wanted to ensure that the public could see the benefits of this treatment and believe that their babies could be saved. The methods that he adapted were strange, even when compared to modern standards, but they did work, and the lives of many premature babies were saved. Cowney's success in helping premature babies drew attention to tragedies in the wider medical world as well. St. Louis had planned an incubator exhibit in their 1904 World's Fair, But the organizers did not invite Cowney to the exhibit. Instead, they went for the lowest bidder, whose name was Joseph Hardy. He was fully ignorant about caring for premature babies, but was licensed with medical credentials. After the exhibit was open for quite some time, Humane Society Examination did a survey and learned that 39 babies have died out of 43 who were taken care of within the incubators. Dr. Cowney then published an open letter in the New York Evening Journal by titling it as the crime of the decade. Dr. Cowney died in 1950 at 80 years old. He had closed his exhibit of incubators and premature babies 7 years before his death in 1943. He was successful in saving between 6,500 or 7,000 lives over his lifetime. That's 7,000 babies saved. What he did was a testament to his dedication to help premature babies and give them new life. It also highlighted how the medical establishment failed to help those babies who could have been saved. As per a book written on him named The Strange Case of Dr. Cowney, How a Mysterious European Showman Saved Thousands of American Babies by Don Rafael, Dr. Cowney left no records for his life-saving efforts, but it's obvious that he was not able to save every baby that he took in. However, he claimed an 85% survival rate, and his efforts saved babies who would otherwise have died. It's believed that most of the deaths of premature babies he took in were within a couple of days of receiving them. Therefore, he made a statement that if a baby lives for 7 days within the incubator under Dr. Cowney's charge, they were not going to die. However, Dr. Martin Cowney allegedly never actually qualified as a medical doctor. To become a physician in Germany, one was required to write a thesis. The US National Library of Medicine has copies of the German records. However, librarians couldn't locate any thesis written by Dr. Cowney. In the 1910 US Census, Dr. Cowney listed his career as surgical instruments. Even though he claimed to be the inventor of an incubator, it doesn't seem to be any evidence that he registered an incubator patent in the US. Maybe Dr. Cowney was a technician, yet by 1930 he was describing himself in the census as a physician. Over time, the success of Dr. Cowney's facility began to attract the attention of some of America's leading pediatricians. Up until the late 1930s, there were only a few hospitals with incubators, so doctors sent premature babies to Dr. Cowney. He took in babies from all backgrounds, regardless of race or social class. He didn't take a penny from the parents of the babies. He covered all the costs through the entrance fees. Allegedly, unaware that Dr. Cowney was not a qualified doctor, pediatricians began visiting the fairgrounds to collaborate with him and study the babies in his care. The Yale professor, pediatrician and child developmental psychologist Arnold Giselle visited Dr. Cowney multiple times at the 1939 New York World's Fair. He brought a cameraman with him to film the babies in Dr. Cowney's facility. Of all Dr. Cowney's professional associations, his friendship with Maurice Fishbane, the president of the American Medical Association, AMA, is the most fascinating. Maurice was the head of the AMA for 25 years and led the association's crusade against quack doctors. The two men were so close that Maurice sent his aspiring medic son Justin to discuss his career with Dr. Cowney in New York. Over the course of his nearly 50-year career, Dr. Cowney took in around 8,000 babies, of whom he claimed to have saved around 6,500. While there is no way of verifying the numbers, pediatricians today acknowledge that the team of doctors and nurses which Dr. Cowney assembled was highly skilled, ensuring the babies got the best care available in America at the time. That's why Dr. Lawrence Gardner, pediatrician and professor emeritus at the University of Chicago, believes that Dr. Cowney was an important figure in American medical history. Quote, "I wouldn't dismiss Martin County at all," end of quote. Martin County was well respected by the medical community at that time. His operation was highly respected and well known to physicians. To his former graduates, Dr. County is a hero to whom they owe their lives. They speak of him as the only man who believed they were worth saving and the only one who was prepared to care for them without charge. Kathy Meyer was born 8 weeks premature in 1939. She was taken to Cornell University's New York Hospital, which just opened a training and research center for premature infants, the first facility of its kind on the eastern seaboard. When Kathy's parents were told she would need to stay in the hospital for several months and they realized they couldn't afford to pay the bills, her pediatrician suggested they send her to Martin County at the New York World's Fair. Dr. County sent his incubator ambulance straight to the hospital to collect Kathy. "I was a sick baby," she said. "If it wasn't for County, I wouldn't be here today. And neither would my 4 children and 5 grandchildren. We have so much to thank him for." Lucille Horn was a twin born prematurely in 1920 in Brooklyn. Her sister died and doctors told her father to hold off on a funeral because Lucille would not survive the day. But her father said that's impossible. They needed to do something for her. So Lucille's father wrapped her in a towel and took her in a cab to the incubator. She went to Dr. County and stayed with him for almost 5 months. Lucille told her story at 95 years old, so she survived. She lived a long, full life with a husband and 5 children, and she died in 2017, aged 96. But her life might not have happened if not for Dr. County.
Well, you were the miracle baby.
Lucille Horn was born premature in 1920. Her twin sister died in delivery, and her parents were told Lucille wouldn't survive the day. But her father refused to believe it.
And he said, "Well, that's impossible. She's alive now. We have to do something for her."
As the story goes, Horn's father wrapped her in a towel, ran out of the hospital, and grabbed the cab, rushing her to Dr. Martin County on the Coney Island boardwalk, where he had an exhibit of premature babies in incubators.
He set up what was almost a living, controlled experiment open to the public in which you could visit the infant incubators.
In the early 20th century, incubators were not the standard of care in hospitals. Dr. County wanted to change that. He took his life-saving technology on the road to several World's Fairs, using the admission fee to pay for the infant's care. The preemie's parents were never charged.
We could never do this today, but at the time, he was a leader. And I think we owe a lot of the very basic principles of neonatology to this gentleman and his teachers.
I didn't go home until I was 5 pounds.
It's estimated Dr. County saved over 7,000 premature babies, including Beth Allen, an incubator baby in 1941.
The whole thing is just amazing to me, and the older I get, the more appreciative I am of the opportunity that I was given to be here, to talk to you, and to live the wonderful life that I've had.
A sentiment echoed by Horn.
But I'm very grateful for all of it.
Dr. County died in 1950, shortly after incubators became the standard of care in hospitals around the world. Joseph Frederick, Associated Press, New York.
Carol Boyce Heinisch was born prematurely in 1942 and taken to County's exhibit in Atlantic City, New Jersey. Martin County was an incredible man. He should be famous for what he did. He saved thousands of us, she says. Carol still has the identity necklace made of pink beads with her name in white beads, which she was given in the incubator facility. "Nobody else was offering to do anything to save me," says another of the babies, Beth Allen, who was born 3 months premature in Brooklyn in 1941. When a physician suggested her parents take her to Coney Island, her mother refused, insisting that her daughter wasn't a freak. Dr. County came to the hospital and persuaded her parents to let him care for her. Every Father's Day, her parents took her to see Dr. County. When he died in 1950, they attended the funeral. "Without Martin County, I wouldn't have had a life," she says.
My whole life, I always was hoping to meet other people who were saved by Dr. County. He saved thousands of babies, so we're grateful to him. Hi, I'm Kathy Ashmeyer, and I was born in July of 1939. And I was 2 months early. When I got to New York Hospital, they put me in an incubator, which was one of the first they ever had at New York Hospital. And they said to my father, "How are you going to pay for this? She's going to be here for a few months." And my father said, "I have no idea. I just bought a house. I have a 3-year-old. I have no idea how I'm going to pay for this. You can take her to the World's Fair. And she lives out near, you live out near there, and we'll take her there." So they took me by ambulance to the New York World's Fair, 39 World's Fair, and I was on exhibition for 2 months. The most exciting part of it, when I was about 9 years old, my father had to take me back to New York Hospital because he got a letter saying that they needed to examine me, and they found out that I had very good eyesight. And they said to my father, "Why does she have such good eyesight?" And my father said, "Well, she was, here for only a couple of weeks." And they said, "Oh my goodness, because she wasn't here, her eyesight is perfect. The incubators here had too much oxygen." So not only did Dr. Cooney save me, but he saved my eyesight.
My name is Beth Allen, and I'm proud to be one of Dr. Cooney's babes. I was born in May of 1941. I weighed 1 pound, 10 ounces, and I was born in what is now Maimonides Hospital in Brooklyn. I was a twin. My twin was a little smaller than I was, and her lungs were not developed enough, and she only lived for 2 days. The doctors at the hospitals told my parents that I should be taken care of by Dr. Cooney, that he was the only one who could care for me. And my mother was very against having me sent there. She knew of the exhibits in Coney Island. She knew it was a sideshow. She told the doctors that her baby was not a freak, and she did not want me sent there. So I guess they contacted Dr. Cooney, and he came to the hospital and spoke to my mother, and he must have been very persuasive because he left with me, and I was in Luna Park in the incubator for 3 months until I weighed about 5 pounds. For several years after I was home, my parents took me to visit Dr. Cooney every Father's Day, and they did go to his funeral in 1950 when he died virtually penniless because he lost all his money at the World's Fairs.
And these are just very few of the lives that Dr. Cooney saved. By the 1940s, the medical community was finally taking the concept of child hatcheries seriously and began incorporating them into their neonatal care routines in hospitals. And Martin County was able to finally shut down his sideshow in 1943. But even after child hatcheries, now called incubators, were fully accepted in the medical community, additional advances were also developed to perfect neonatal care in the US. Techniques that Dr. Couney had perfected, including kangaroo care, which is in-room bonding between the parents and the baby, and advanced antiseptic techniques, were all adopted by the modern medical community. Today, even though 1 in 10 babies is born prematurely in the US, their chances of survival are much higher than ever before thanks to Dr. Couney's child hatcheries. His World's Fair sideshows and Coney Island exhibitions paved the way for modern American medical advancements in caring for premature births. Dr. Couney, like I mentioned previously, retired in 1943, and New York hospitals finally had begun to understand how to treat premature infants, so he was able to retire, and he died just 7 years later. Dr. Martin Couney saved thousands of very small lives, and in that way he saved thousands of worlds. Today, the chance of survival of premature babies all over the world is greatly improved thanks to Dr. Couney and his exposure babies. Like I said, Dr. Couney died in 1950 at the age of 80 or 81. Again, it's not very clear because of the date of birth not being very clear. Although we don't know much about him, we definitely know an important one. A new horizon opened up for good in medical history thanks to him. I personally think that when it comes to Dr. Couney, the end justifies the means 100%. I believe that. He didn't have a medical license, but he saved many more lives of babies that qualified doctors didn't, and for that I think he's a hero. In my eyes, he wasn't a conman or a fraud. He genuinely cared for the weaklings and saved them when no one else would. I hope I didn't repeat myself too much in the info that I gave you, but when I'm reviewing scripts in general, I usually review them and read them more than once, and at times I can't really tell if I read the same thing twice or it just became familiar from, you know, constantly reading and rereading and so on. So with this we got to the end of today's video. I'm really interested to hear your guys' opinions on Dr. Martin, if he was a conman, if he was a fraud, or if, like I think, the end justified the means. I mean, I'm gonna say it again, in my eyes, he's a hero, and in my eyes, to me, it doesn't matter that he didn't have a medical license, and even if he lied that he was a doctor just to get more attention brought to the situation and to the life-saving techniques, then I think it was all worth it. But again, please guys, do let me know what you think in the comment section under the video. Also, if you are interested in any of the products I use for today's makeup, all of the products are listed in the description under this video. I also take case suggestions, so if you have any suggestion in particular that you want me to cover, just leave any details you have in the comments under the video. Thank you so much for watching. For now, take care, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!